That's annoying. All right, so whoa, this point right here echoes back at me. So any questions, comments, concerns, feelings, anything about the prompts or about life or about overall things? Jake.
Okay, so for one of the days, we know that the final draft is due on March 24th.
Yes.
On one of the paper days before that, are we just gonna do like a draft overview?
So here's the way that the class next Wednesday is going to go. This is going to be a condensed version of the what am I looking for class. So it's basically, if you've written an argumentative paper, the main things I'm going to be highlighting are ways in which philosophical argumentative papers are somewhat different than others and what exactly I'm looking for. This is the make sure that we're all on the same page so you know what the fuck I'm looking for day. If you want to do draft overview, basically you can either meet with me at any point in person or just send me a digital copy of whatever you have and I will give you feedback on it and send it back to you. I just need it by noon on Thursday, March 20th, because that will give me enough time to get you feedback, even if my kid starts puking everywhere. And then you have time to correct the suggestions I give you. But you can also do multiple rounds. So if you decide on Monday, March, whatever day is 3 days before March 20th to turn in a draft and I get you feedback on Tuesday, and then you stay up all night and make adjustments and then turn in another one on Wednesday, I will give you another round of feedback.
So in terms of like in the past when you've read arguments investing, usually there's like an article I reference that to prove my point. And since the way to prove it is by citing other opinions, like how do I?
So this is a great question. We'll talk more about this on Wednesday, but let me just give you the basic version. Instead of using like factual sources directly, what you're trying to do is combine facts together into arguments like what we were talking about yesterday. So here would be the idea. Imagine that you are trying to argue, let's just come up with something that we did this semester that isn't one of these prompts.
Babies.
Pardon?
Babies.
What about babies? They're delicious.
Yeah, that was.
So here's the difference. If the thesis you're arguing for is babies are delicious, one thing you could do in an alternate universe is get a bunch of like, if we lived in a cannibal society, you could get a lot of testimony from cannibals and see what they say. But an alternative is to come up with a way of arguing for that doesn't directly draw on testimony, but instead is combining things you know to prove this point. So you could say something like, pig is delicious. Human meat is most similar to pig meat. Therefore, human meat is probably delicious. So you're still using facts at a lower level, but very often you're combining things that can't, it's not just like you have a conclusion. Right over here. It's not just that you have a conclusion and the support is that someone said it. It's rather, you've got a conclusion and you give a reason. And then the support and what people say coming down at this lower level of reason. So it would be like, according to the chemical breakdown of meat as done by the American Meat Association, it's been found that chemically, pig meat is most similar to human meat compared to others. So the facts are going to come in here to prove your reason that pig meat is like human meat and therefore baby. But the main conclusion, you're not going to have necessarily direct evidence of. So in these cases with the lobsters, say you're arguing it's bad to boil the lobsters alive. Your first reason would be it causes them pain. And you can't just say like, or up here, your conclusion is it's bad to boil them alive. You can't just go, somebody said it's bad to boil them alive. Instead, what you've got is reason one, it causes them pain. And then you're going to have to come along and explain what proves that it causes them pain. And maybe there you could bring in a testimonial, or you could say, well, they thrash around and things, other things that thrash around are in pain, so therefore they're in pain. Does that make sense? Okay. Also, digital people, you're welcome to type your questions out. New rule. So this is a great question. I cannot tell you precisely what the grade would be, and the reason why is yeah, Hunter, give me 1 second. I'll respond to that, but you're generally correct. So the general reason I cannot give you a precise grade is that every semester after I finish grading, my brain like does a trash empty of what all the grades were. And then every semester I need to recalibrate what a B looks like, what an A looks like, what a C looks like. And so I cannot precisely tell you, is this an 87 or an 84 until I see a few other papers and get my grading calibrated. But I can generally tell you, like, given this is going to fall somewhere between probably 83 and 89. Or it will fall somewhere between like 90 and 93. Yeah, I can give you a rough estimate. So Hunter asked, from what I'm gathering, is the paper just us rationalizing our thesis with rational thoughts? Yes, that's exactly what it is. You have a thesis, which is one of the possible positions on these three things you're debating. And then the rest of the paper is trying to explain why somebody else should accept that conclusion. So the way to think about it is the conclusion you are arguing for, the thesis, you are trying to prove it to somebody else that you're right. And what do you need to do to prove you're right? Well, that's where the writing process comes in, because there's no one correct way of doing it. Assume that you are trying to convince somebody who is an absolute idiot, doesn't care about this topic, and is generally quite over-hungry. And your job is to convince them that your thesis is correct. That's the way to frame this. Jake, is that a hand or is that a?
So on the readings, do we have to like cite it if we have it?
Great question. My general feelings on citations are somebody out there in the world gives a shit about how you do it, but that person is not me. So my method of citation is if you are using something from class and I know what it is you're using, I don't care about the citation. If you bring in outside sources, and I'll say this again next week, but do you have to bring in outside sources? Absolutely not. It is an option. If you want to, say, argue about the cultural relativism case by bringing in something you learned in your anthropology class of some particular culture and you think it really nicely illustrates the point, bring it in. Awesome. If you want to bring in an article that you've read elsewhere or in a different class, awesome. But in terms of citing it, all I need is a URL or just something such that when I find it interesting, I can find it. And if the plagiarism gods came down from on a high, I could say, no, this isn't plagiarized. But like my general thing is, you have better things to do than worry about MLA formatting. This is a whatever you need. As long as there's something I can point to, if the plagiarism gods came down from on high, I don't really care. Some people have literally just at the end, just like included a hyperlink, and that's enough. Yep.
3 to 5 pages isn't necessarily required, you generally what you think is suited. Follow the format as much as you can, and just give it a draft of the 20th.
And drafts are optional. You do not have to turn in a draft. It's up to you. If you want more feedback from me on a draft before the final thing, awesome. If you're somebody who's like, I'm a great writer, I don't give a shit what you have to say, just give me a grade at the end, cool, then that's what we'll do. McCallis. So this is a great point, and here's a difference I want to draw, and I'll bring this up more next time, and I'm glad you brought it up here. You have to take a stance, but it can be a subtle stance. And there's a difference between a subtle stance and no stance. So no stance is when you say, there's some people on this side, there's some people on this side, and then you finish. You're like, here's some thoughts over here. Here's some thoughts over here. That is not taking a stance. But you can take a subtle stance that uses that same information and turn it into a stance just by adding a little bit more. What you can do is say something like, so like the lobster case, you could say something like, here's a bunch of evidence that seems to suggest that lobsters feel pain. Here's a bunch of evidence that suggests they don't. To not take a stance would just be to end there. To take a subtle stance is to say, and given this fact, we are in such a state, we cannot say which one is correct. In fact, my stance is that we cannot take a stance. So you can take like this meta stance. You don't just want to give facts and end it, but you're welcome to think of it this way. You aren't allowed to just sit on the fence, but if you explain why fence sitting is the right response, that is no longer just fence sitting, that is an argument. And that's totally okay. So, and oftentimes those subtle sorts of arguments are the best ones because they show you're really engaging with the material. But one thing that you don't need to do, so like I know in journalism things, they're always like, and at the end, say what the other side says. In an argument, your goal is to beat the person who's listening to you into submission and force them to accept your conclusion. Therefore, if you want to bring up what the other side says, bring it up and then smash it to smithereens. So if you say, now the other side says lobsters feel pain, now take some time and fucking pound in and be like, actually though, that's complete bullshit. I mean, you're allowed to curse in them, but like, you probably don't want to because it's not good practice. But yeah, so don't just, it's not about giving an even stance. It's about convincing an imaginary reader, or in this case, a person who's going to have to read a whole lot of papers, that your conclusion, even if they don't ultimately agree with you, you have given them good reason to think that you might be right and that your conclusion might be right. It's not about like it's not about just describing the cases. It's about using the descriptions to prove certain points. More questions for me. Comments, concerns. Also, digital people, same things for you all.
You describe the situation, so they imagine that they are still tell you, like, my friends asked me this.
Yes, exactly. So here's the way to think about it. There's a few ways of approaching this. Generally speaking, the most persuasive essays are written such that somebody who doesn't know what's being talked about could still follow along. Because if you don't assume the person if you assume the person knows what you're talking about, you might ignore certain key points, which will make it less persuasive. And also, it won't show from a grading standpoint that you fully understand all the key points. So really, the first things and we'll talk more about this next Wednesday. The first thing you should do is just like, if you're writing on paper 1, just tell me that you're talking, like your friends are arguing about lobsters. Like you can basically just paraphrase the prompts. And the reason this is so important is just because always assume whenever you're writing a paper that you are going to be the last person graded. Because if you are the last person graded, that means your professor has already graded 60 papers sometimes, and their brain is mush. And if their brain is mush, you want to do the heavy lifting for them and make it as clear as possible. So it's one of these prepare for the worst, hope for the best things. If you prepare that I'm going to have read so many papers, I forget what my own prompts were. If you remind me of it, it will make it easier to follow along. And generally speaking, the best papers are the ones in which I do not have to go back through them a second time to figure out what's going on. Other questions, comments, concerns, feelings?
Can you give us like an example?
I have, shoot me, somebody, either digital people or human people, shoot me an email and I will show you. I have some old ones that I can give you. Yeah, but I'm gonna forget to post it. So yeah, I will post it to the Brightspace, but you have to remind me to post it to the Brightspace. So it's not that I'm gonna email it out just to you. I will give it to everybody. It's just you need to remind me to give it to everybody because my brain is already dreading daylight savings. Yeah, this fucking weekend. Yes, we're gonna lose an hour. We will suffer forever. Or at least you're gonna hear me complaining about it for weeks. I apologize in advance.
I'm pretty sure.
No, but like I'm like really annoying about it.
Well, yeah, obviously, we have a baby to take care of.
I know, and he's gonna be, but I've been complaining about it for years, long before the baby. I'm just a giant baby myself about it. Other questions? It can be specifics or it can be generals. Yes, so here's, and we'll talk more about this. Basically, the way to think about it is this goes back to assume the reader doesn't know who the hell you are. Not who the hell you are, what the hell you're talking about. So if you do not assume your reader doesn't know what utilitarianism is, then you're going to not be able to show me you understand what utilitarianism is. And also, you are going to be highlighting things. The way in which you define it and you draw on it will help inform how the rest of the paper goes. So you always want to include those sorts of definitions, yes. Even if it's something that, now, there is a limit, like you don't have to define, you don't have to define like the word good. Like generally speaking, we know what good means, so you can just say good, by which I mean morally good. But you wouldn't have to give a bunch of examples, or like if you bring up an example of, say, Christopher Columbus, you don't have to give a full biography of who he was. And so answering Hunter's question, if I have an example from memory, like how Columbus viewed the natives, should I find the direct source to his exact view, or is my citation from memory okay? As long as you're not like making up quotations, I'm totally fine. Like Columbus is enough in common sense that you can do it. You could even just say something generally like, colonists felt this way. Now, if you wanted to include a direct quote and it's one that's like truly like appalling, it can be like, it can make your argument even more persuasive, but you do not need to go into detail on things like exactly what Columbus's views were, as long as your general paraphrase would work. This is in the context of the cultural relativism question, I think. Hi, Marla. We're up to 4 digital humans and 6 physical humans. Other questions for me? Comments, concerns, feelings, thoughts? I'll say this now and then I'll say it again. On Wednesday, I do not care about a lot of things that you typically are told to care about, like spelling, grammar, that sort of crap. So if you want to practice that stuff, you're welcome to, but I will never take off points. So if you have limited brain power, don't worry about spelling. I will never take off for that. Also, like, don't worry about, another thing is just like simple language is good. These are hard concepts. Don't feel the need to use very fancy wording. If children works, don't say progeny. Like, there's no need to. If bad works, don't say deleterious. There's no. Exactly.
What did you say?
Deleterious. It means it's like something that is harm. I think it physically means harmful. Deleterious. Causing harm or damage. Divorce is assumed to have deleterious effects on children. Just say divorce is bad for kids. Much simpler. Other questions for me? Try multi-speaker view. No, I don't want multi-speaker view.
You're just gonna get like one speaker at a time, and then all of a sudden, if someone else makes a noise, you're just gonna see another speaker pop up. So
Yeah, I do.
Far,
I mean, the owls freak me out enough. Has anyone in any of their classes had to deal with those little creepy owl cameras? Like, you'll know over at NBC, they're like these little cameras that look like they look almost like Alexas, and they're sound sensitive. So it's like designed for a large lecture hall. And if somebody starts talking, it like focuses in on, zooms in on whoever's talking. It creeps me out a lot, especially because whenever they shut off, they just start hooting. Like they literally go like, whoo-hoo, because they're called owls.
It's so weird.
So if you go into a classroom in NVC, there are little things on, like at the front that look like this.
I've seen that.
Yeah, nobody uses them because they're creepy, but they're there. Other questions for me from any of you humans or you humans? New rule,
So you said that there's 6 physical humans, there's 4 different.
4 digital humans.
So does that mean that there's, actually 7 physical and 5 digital?
I just didn't count myself at all. I'm not human. I'm a figment of your imagination designed to torture you. Other questions, comments, concerns? I'm trying to think of what sorts of facts I often forget to say in the other reading that would be helpful to bring up front.
Which reading?
Or sorry, not which reading, in the other talk about Papers Day. Like we've got the official talk about Papers Day, which will be next Wednesday. And sometimes I forget to bring up things. So I'm trying to think of the things that I forget to bring up. Our digital humans, you've got to have, it can't just be Hunter who has questions. We'll talk more about signposts next class. Yes. Signposts are topic sentences on steroids. One way to think about them, they're sentences that you include at the start of a paragraph to say exactly what that paragraph's about to do before you do it. They're not necessary, but they can be very helpful in a complex argument. We'll talk about those more next time. We can talk about different ways of doing it, but I do think the most helpful tip, and I'll bring this up next time, is just assume your reader is lazy, stupid, and mean. And if you assume your reader is lazy, stupid, and mean, and you write as if they're lazy, stupid, and mean, you will go into the level of detail needed to be a very impressive, persuasive paper.
I would love to think that, but if I know someone is stupid and mean, I don't want to.
Yes, this is one flaw with it, but the thing is that everybody is to some degree lazy, stupid, and mean. So even if the person you're actually engaging with isn't as lazy, stupid, and mean as the imaginary thing, you're still not going to be hurt by treating them as if they're lazy, stupid, and mean.
I treat them as my student if possible.
Well, that's yeah.
Because it's like I don't have a responsibility for you being stupid.
Let's see, what other things do I have on here? Again, I'll say this again. If you need an extension, just ask. I forgot to start it early. I ran out of time. I just want to give it another read through or all acceptable excuses. I would much rather you have. I'd much rather you all turn in something you're happy with at the end of the day than meet some arbitrary deadline. So seriously, like I have no judgment at all. Yes.
For the third topic, can I bring you something I had from my last paper? Or
Depends on how much you're bringing in. Like if it's a thought experiment example thing you thought of, fine. If you're just control C, control Ving.
Oh, no, not that.
Okay.
Like, I want to take the situation that you gave me like last semester I did with you. And then like say if I'm supporting it, I would like bring in an example that I argue.
Yes.
If I'm going against it, I take that example and say, this is exactly why it's wrong.
So what you're thinking is using your past time slice of yourself as your opponent?
Kind of.
Yes, you can definitely do that. Yeah. Other questions for me, digital people, human people, physical people. Anyone have any other exciting things going on in their lives?
So
Oh.
I think I've gained like maybe do something with them. Like I tried to get it, but I haven't done it. I gotta say that for the last night, like the weather kept changing too fast. Like,
Yeah.
now it's like really freaking cold, and it was almost like it was really hot this morning.
How many drafts? Oh, good question, Marlo. You can submit however many drafts you want, so long as they're all in before that date. So if you want to turn in one on a Monday and then I get it back to you on Tuesday, you want to turn in another one on Wednesday and I get it back to you on Thursday, that's fine. If you want to do like a Sunday and I get it back to you Monday and then Tuesday, I get it back to you Wednesday and you submit a Thursday and I get it back to you Friday, totally fine. I'm happy to read however many. Also, with drafts, they don't have to be complete drafts. If you want to like, before you really get going, show me what your intro paragraph looks like and want me to read that over, I'm happy to do just that little bit. And then you can be like, awesome, and then send me a fuller draft later or anything like that. Like my goal is to be here to provide you with whatever will help you write a paper that you are happy and not miserable with. So whatever you want. Also, if for you want to like add in details or alter the prompts slightly, as long as you tell me what you're doing, just so I'm able to follow along, I'm fine with that too. Like seriously, I'm as flexible and stuff as I can be. See what other things. What other things are useful to say about papers? Oh, here's one that I sometimes forget. Don't be afraid to use the first person. There's no problem in using the word I. I know that in some classes you're told not to do that. It's totally fine in a philosophy paper because sometimes it's just a lot clearer to say, I will argue that, than this paper will argue that, or the subsequent argument will be. Like those things are just sometimes say I. Simpler. Don't be afraid to just, and all those silly style rules are dumb anyway. All right. If nobody has any questions for me, I have nothing else I need to say about this other than ask me questions if you have them, and I will send out a sample paper when somebody emails me to remind me to post to the Blackboard. Brightspace. Yeah, that's posted as of this morning and emailed to you. And I realize now that whenever I post it to Brightspace and I make an announcement, Brightspace also emails you. So you'll get like 2 emails right in a row, which is always pretty. Pardon?
You have to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can't be accused of not keeping you in the loop. I can be accused of blowing up your inbox and preventing you from seeing all the other fun things. Any other exciting things going on? Any fun weekend plans other than sleeping less than you usually do and being mad about it?
I like basically can't sleep over like 6 to 8 hours. Like my body literally just wakes up. I can't sleep.
I could probably, if left to my own devices, sleep 15 hours a day.
I wish I would.
I'm so jealous. Do any of you know any of those like truly miraculous superhumans that can function on like 3 hours a night and like totally fine?
I've done that a few times.
But like there's certain people who like every night will just get 2 hours and be totally fine the next day.
I did that from 9th grade to last semester.
How the hell are you alive? I just like shut down after a while.
It comes to a point where you kind of like got used to it. Kind of like, you know how before we had like iPads and everything.
Yeah, but I feel like 2 hours. Supposedly Bill Clinton was like an expert at sleeping. He could just like sleep at 5-minute intervals. So like he'd be waiting to like give a speech or something, but just like lean against the wall and sleep for 5 minutes, and then they'd call on him and he'd just like go and be ready to go. So like, yeah, humans are pretty like the extremes of human behavior are fascinating.
I don't know, 5 minutes. No, that's.
No, he would also get like a rather reasonable amount of sleep at night, I think. But I think he could function on very little sleep at night because he was able to just grab like a minute here and there everywhere.
That's impressive. You have to just wake up whenever.
Yeah. There's a lot of like historical figures who, when you learn about them, it turns out that they had like very abnormal minds in like unique ways. Yeah.
Didn't like Abraham Lincoln like barely sleep?
That might be true.
Because I remember reading somewhere about it where he's like often he was up at night just like reading away because he was so stressed.
Oh yeah, he had major like depression and anxiety issues. That was definitely the case. Humans are fascinating. All right. I'm gonna stop the recording if nobody else has questions, but I will hang around here if people want to keep